In examining especially second wave feministic discourse, it's clear. The premise is there are physical differences. Simone de Beauvoir makes that candidly clear. There are physical differences between men and women. We know them. We're not ignorant to them. She even mentions emotional differences in her book, The Second Sex, in her chapter on biology. She says, even biological differences, anatomical differences, physiological differences, psychological differences, emotional differences. But the argument goes as follows: despite those differences, there should be equality. Does that make sense so far? So a second wave feminist would say, despite those differences, there should be equality afforded. What kind of equality? Political equality, social equality, economic equality. This is pretty much in a nutshell what the argument is. Now obviously one could justifiably ask, what's the proof for that? What's the evidence for that? Why should that be the case? How is that entailment made? From first principles, philosophical principles, how can you justify that? And that's really not a question that there is any answer to, frankly, or that there is any formula given for us on how to answer those questions. However, and this is moving on now to the second part of the lecture, which I want to spend a little bit of time on. Are we consistent? Or are feminists consistent? In particular, second wave feminists, are they consistent in the application of those principles? Now, there are three live examples I want to give you to show you how problematic these assumptions are for feminists. The first one relates, and I'm sure many of you might have been exposed to this. It's a big thing on the news now, actually. That's why I'm bringing it up. It's the idea of transgendered sports. Now, I'm not sure if this is kind of spilled over to Malaysia, but this is certainly a hot topic in the West, in America and the UK, Western Europe. The question is, say for instance you have someone who identifies and who is identified biologically as a man. They do a gender reassignment surgery and they become self-identified as a woman. Okay, so they do a gender reassignment surgery and they become self-identified as a woman. Can they participate in sports with women? Now, second wave feminists, on the whole, seem averse to the idea. Now, you can't make a generalization with anything, but big time second wave feminists like Germaine Greer, who wrote the book in 1971, The Female Eunuch. She's like one of the founding mothers of feminism. And she, in an interview, she completely rejected the idea. And guess what she invoked? She invoked anatomical and biological advantage. Wait a minute. Hold on now. Hold on now. Let me hear the argument. Yeah, so the argument goes that since the person, and this is a very sensical argument to me, as a non-feminist, right? The argument goes, since men have anatomical, biological advantages, hormonal advantages, and even having gone through that process, and then the gender reassignment happens, if they now compete with women, it will give them an unfair advantage and it will give them an entitled, overprivileged position in that context. Wait a minute. This is important now. I thought you said sex was or not sex, because that's a third wave construct. Some say that sex is a social construct. Judith Butler hinted to this in her book, Gender Troubles 1990. But not this. Some do say that. I thought you said gender was a social construct. No. And you know, it becomes even more problematic. Do you know when it becomes more problematic? When we start to see. So the question is now, should there be an equality of opportunity for men and women in certain sports, should we segregate and separate them? You don't like segregation, but you have it in sports. But no, it's justified for anatomical and biological reasons. So you're saying that on biological and anatomical grounds, you can justify separation? Wait, hold on now. But men will be given an advantage. Why don't you make that argument in all contexts of categories? For instance, if you look at the 100-meter dash, and I made this argument before, I'll make it again. The 100-meter sprint, in the last 100 years, I don't know of one white man who's won that. No, I don't know. I don't know of one white man that's won that. It's dominated by black people. Not only just black people, West Africans and Jamaicans. Should we separate the blacks from the whites? Now, if you say we shouldn't separate the blacks from the whites, you're contradicting yourself. You know why? Because you said in cases where there is biological and anatomical advantages for one category of person over another category of person, there should be separation. So why should that be the case only for gender? Why shouldn't it also be the case for race? Because you'll be called racist. This is selective invocation. You see, they are not even consistent with their principles. East Africans are very good at long distance. You know, we have someone called Mo Farah. Very good runner, you know. They have an advantage. East Africans bodily, they have a bodily advantage. White people have an advantage in something, swimming. And I don't want to be controversial, but I've never seen a black man win that swimming race. I was at Michael Phelps. How many times has he won it? But are we going to separate the blacks from the whites? We're not going to separate the blacks from the whites. So what kind of equality do you want? So some feminists would say we want equality of opportunity. And some would actually say we want equality of outcome. What? Oh, right, sorry, yeah. Some would say we want an equality of opportunity. Almost all feminists would say that, in fact. So why don't you have an equality of opportunity in sports? Why don't we arrange parameters that mean that people of the same weight, whether they're men and women, they go together in competition? We can do that. It's not difficult. It's not difficult. In boxing, for example, you don't think there's 75-kilogram women? That's the most popular category for men. Let's bring them together. Fight. You want equality of opportunity? No, but that's advantage, man. But you said the anatomical thing. You see, it is really problematic. You have segregation, acquiesced segregation in some spheres. Where are the feminists? We need to stand against this. Seriously. If you're principally averse to a biological, anatomical argument, arrange parameters which does not discriminate on gender in the field of sports. But they'll never do that because it's not about equality, it's about entitlement. It's about where can we find the advantages. That's the problem. And this case becomes more exacerbated when we look at war. We need to rectify the social ills and problems of the past, the patriarchal society, and we need to have equality of opportunity in all spheres, in all industries, political, social, and economic. There should be absolutely no exception to that. But war, that entails death, that entails injury. We don't really know about that one. I've never actually come across a movement that aims to rectify a historic accumulation of gender discrimination against men in the field of war. Almost every military in every country in the world, in all of history, has been male-dominated. Men have died. Now, if we're being honest, we should say that's a severe matriarchy. You have forced men to be societally inclined or forced to kill themselves and fight themselves for the protection of the country. So on feminism, if there's an equality of opportunity, we should address that historic discrimination, and we should look at all the wars that men were dominating, the armies in them, and we should have female-only conscription and draft, forcing the women to fight for the men for at least the amount of time that would equalize the historic imbalance. No, but brother.
What about the dangerous jobs, which have been flooded by males, men? Is that patriarchy, or is that actually a matriarchy? What should we call that? Men have felt the need to go to mining jobs, doing all kinds of dangerous work, for the most part. So if we're going to go with the equality premise, shouldn't we rectify that? The problem is, guys, it's just too selective. You choose when to be absolutely equal, and you choose your own exception. This is the problem. So these are some clear examples of inconsistencies, even using the first principles of feminism, even using exactly what they're talking about.